I'm here with Bengals reporter Elise Jesse. We are finally making some content together.
Finally,
right?
I love it.
It took us coming to Super Bowl Radio Row all the way in New Orleans to make it happen, but I'm happy I'm sitting down with you.
Happy to be here.
You know, obviously the Bengals have a lot to figure out this offseason.
Yeah.
From Tee Higgins' contract to Trey Hendrickson's contract to Jamar Chase's contract. But let's start over with Tee Higgins. You know, there are a lot of people that are speculating what the Bengals should do, what the Bengals will do. I'm really curious to hear what your thoughts are, to see if we're aligned on it. But, you know, obviously Tee Higgins is in line for a huge payday.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on the whole Tee Higgins contract situation, and how do you think this thing plays out?
Well, first and foremost, I, like Joe Burrow, want Tee Higgins to stay in Cincinnati because you see how explosive this offense is when teams have to account for not only Jamar Chase, but also Tee Higgins.
Right.
On the other side of that, I also know that there are other teams who are salivating for a wide receiver like Tee Higgins. He is a wide receiver one. And I don't know, is he out of the Bengals tax bracket? Like, I don't know if the Bengals could afford a $30 million price tag, and do it comfortably is what I'm saying. Because if you allocate so much money to Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Tee Higgins, the amount of money you have left, you have to go so young and rely on so many rookies to then start on defense.
Right.
Luckily, they have Al Golden, which kind of helps. But my prediction would be that they would tag Tee Higgins. And I know you guys don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
But tag Tee Higgins. And I would not be shocked if they drafted a wide receiver in this draft and just to see how he would work out. Maybe one who is kind of like Tee Higgins and plays like him. And then if he works out, the new receiver works out, I could see them moving on from T.
Yeah, I think that's the tricky part, right? Because when you look at it, you know, a lot of people say, well, you can't pay Tee Higgins that amount of money. But it's like, you look at the Bengals roster and who they are paying. Who are they actually paying right now, right?
Correct. Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow, right? And you've got to try and find a way to keep your good players in place. But I'm right there with you. I can totally see a situation in which they tag Tee Higgins, right? But let me ask you this. Do you see any world possible in which the Bengals explore a trade? Now, you know what I exactly. Your reaction is my reaction. Absolutely not. But I've got to throw it out there, right? Because
man,
it makes sense, right? If a team franchise tags a player, right, and they say, you know what, we're going to try to negotiate with said player. You know, if you know that it's way out of your price range, you might be better served to see what you could potentially get.
See, I love the idea of that for the organization. But I also know the history, the long 12 years of covering this team. I know how they operate also. I very, very specifically remember the botched trade with Andy Dalton where they could have gotten something for him and did not. And they benched him like on his birthday, like right after the such a mess. I would not be opposed to them doing that. But I don't think they would.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's like when those words come out of my mouth, I also think they've also done a lot of stuff under the Zach Taylor era that we have not seen before.
Right.
So they've made little changes here and there. That's a big change, though, in my opinion.
Right.
So I don't know. What do you think?
I listen. I don't think there's any world they trade Tee Higgins. As Duke Tobin said last year at the Combine, we're not in the business of making other teams better.
Yeah.
That was a very Duke Tobin-esque answer when he said that. And I understand why, right?
Yeah.
You do want to keep your good players. But here's another idea that I have. You know, Tee Higgins has expressed his want to stay in Cincinnati. Is there a world in which the Bengals allow him to test the market, see what said offer is out there for Tee Higgins, and then proceed to, you know, make a competitive offer or match the offer? I just think I think that's a dangerous game that they would be playing personally, an extremely dangerous game, especially when you think about teams like the New England Patriots, like the Chicago Bears, like the Green Bay Packers, right? But when you think about it, it also might make the most sense because that'll put you in the ballpark to know exactly what other teams value him at, but also, you know, what you could reasonably get him for.
I think that's about as dangerous as rock climbing up a mountain without a harness. I really do.
I agree.
These teams, he will be courted and courted well if they let him test free agency. That will not end well for them in any capacity.
Right.
I don't see them doing that. Yes, they get a lot of grief for the amount of money they spend, the way they structure deals, their history with players, and how they sometimes move on from homegrown players, which kind of irks everybody, I think. but they're not dumb enough to just let him go and test the market and see what he's worth, because he will find out that he is worth a lot more.
Probably a lot more
in
than
this
he thinks.
market right now, because of his free agency status. He's worth so much more than what they could currently pay him.
Especially when you consider this receiving class as well. It's not as it has been in years past. So moving on from the Tee Higgins situation, I think we're both aligned there that franchise tag is probably what's going to happen.
I can see it.
But let's talk about Trey Hendrickson. He made some interesting comments. He was on the Pat McAfee show. He talked about his him being a little displeased with the way he found out about the comments Zootopia made recently, which is via text from his dad, right? From via a tweet he saw. But what are your thoughts on the Trey Hendrickson situation? I
think obviously he wanted a deal done.
Yeah.
And then he didn't get it. Initially. Yeah. And he asked for a trade.
Yeah.
And I think that, honestly, all the pressure is on his agent.
Yeah.
To get a deal done.
Yeah.
Because what did he got a 1-year extension at that point?
Yep.
I don't think that Trey Hendrickson saw that as good enough. And with any player, Trey is now 30.
Yeah.
With any player, you want to make as much money as possible. You want as much guarantees as possible, because they have to protect themselves also. Like, not every player is going to have a 10, 12, 15-year career.
Right.
Everyone knows that.
Yeah.
So going in, I think he knows that, hey, I was the most productive defensive edge rusher as far as sacks are concerned.
Right.
And I want to be paid for that.
Right. 100%. You want to be paid accordingly. And I wonder if a lot of the Trey Hendrickson discourse comes down to, we know the way the Bengals structure their contracts, right? He did have another 2 years left on his deal when he first asked for money, but the guarantees were no longer a thing. So I wonder, would the Bengals make a special exception, knowing Trey's age, but also the same way we say they know his age, we have to talk about them knowing his production and knowing his value, right? Because we're not just saying Trey Hendrickson anymore. We have to say all-pro Trey Hendrickson, NFL sack leader Trey Hendrickson. So it makes
potentially
me
MVP,
potentially defensive player of the year, Trey Hendrickson. But which I think should be the case. It's kind of crazy he's not being talked about. More about like the TJ Watts and the Myles Garrett. But I wonder, would the Bengals change structurally how they do their contracts to accommodate a Trey Hendrickson? Because I have to think it comes down to the guarantees, guaranteeing past and beyond year one, right? Guaranteeing maybe flowing into. I think the most realistic option is giving Trey Hendrickson a 2 to 3 year extension, having guarantees in both of those years, and then going from there. I think. But again, the way they structure their contracts, they always have to protect themselves, and I get that. I get that. But I think for an exceptional player, a player that has been such a huge piece for the organization, like one would even say a franchise player, I think you have to probably change the way you do things. You don't get a player like Trey Hendrickson, quite often, is my thoughts.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. Yeah. And I love seeing Blackout Trey on NFL Sundays at 1:00. Like, I think that he is absolutely incredible at what he does on the football field. But I also know how the Bengals are. And I also remember, I've talked about this a lot, the Andrew Whitworth contract. And it's because I spoke with them personally about a lot of it and how hurt they were when they essentially felt like they were written off because he was 30, over 30. And so they do consider age. So I think when they're looking at a contract and the length of it, it's like, okay, you're 30 now. Can you be as productive at 32? Can you be as productive at 33? Right.
And the way I always see the production from a pass rusher standpoint. We see Von Miller right now still playing at a high level.
Yeah, it's
right?
wild.
Albeit it's not every play, but you still get Von Miller. I think that pass rush is a position that is invaluable. You can never have enough good pass rushers, especially when you look at a team like the Bengals, right, that struggled in the pass rush department. Outside of Trey Hendrickson, it's a lot to be desired right now. They don't have any true set number 2 edge rusher that can apply pressure on opposing offensive line and on opposing quarterback. So I think they've got to find a way to keep Trey Hendrickson in the fold if they want to make this thing tick. I think he's what's right about this Bengals defense, if you ask me.
In a perfect world, they would give Trey Hendrickson his guarantees, and they would also maybe acquire Myles Garrett. How fun would that be? Can we just pretend?
Listen, if we were in that world and you have Myles Garrett on one side, Trey Hendrickson on the other side.
Imagine?
Oh my God. You talk about wrecking havoc. Like, it would be absolutely insane. I'm a defensive guy through and through. Yeah. I love seeing the pass rush. But the amount that the Browns are going to try to command, right? For Myles Garrett, I don't know if they'll get the 2 first-round picks that they're looking for and I think they said 2 first-round picks, a third-rounder, and a starting caliber player. I don't know if they'll get that, especially
that's a hefty price.
That's a hefty price, but I do think because you have to deal in the world of reality. You got a disgruntled player. So if you're looking to get something of value out of Myles Garrett, I think a first-round pick would do it. But that's for other teams. For the Bengals, what would the Browns charge if they wanted a Myles Garrett? Probably an arm and a leg.
It would, and it would like decimate the team at that point. Yeah. You'd have Myles Garrett, you'd have Trey Hendrickson, maybe Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow. Yeah, you can't win with 4 players. There's a reason why there's 11 on the field at each time. Right, 100%. Like, it's not going to happen.
And one thing that's kind of strange to me too. I while we're on the topics of trades, people were talking about Cooper Kupp recently.
Yep.
Well, $40 million cap hit right now as it stands. I think the guy's production just hasn't been what you expect it to be recently. He's dealt with a lot of injuries. He hasn't been on the football field. So I think that I understand the allure of a Cooper Kupp.
Yes, the name. I mean, he's made a name for himself.
Yes, right. Yeah. He's this triple crown winner. Yeah. This is a guy in Cooper Kupp I think has definitely earned a name for himself in the National Football League. But I think that any team that trades for him, I don't think that they'd be happy with the results, because I think there's a reason. If he was still the same player that people, that the Rams saw in the past, I think that he would still be a Ram, right? I think they would want to keep him, but I just don't see it as a realistic option. So I don't know. I felt that dialogue that I saw a lot of people talking about very interesting. I think the last thing I want to talk to you on, before I let you go, and I appreciate your time as well,
of course,
is what do you think the Bengals should do in free agency? Right? This is a loaded question here. But what do you think the Bengals should do in free agency? Not what they will do, but what they should do.
What can they do?
Right, yeah.
If you're going to commit that much money to Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and potentially Tee Higgins, and potentially Trey Hendrickson, what can you do in free agency? I believe personally, the next few drafts, maybe 2 or 3 drafts, will be the most important drafts if they want to make it to the Super Bowl with Joe Burrow leading the team. Because you not only, and the draft is so weird because a player might be great in college under a certain coach, a player might be great at the Senior Bowl, but once they hit the league and everybody else is at the level that they're at or even better, sometimes those guys just simply don't work out. Like it's a gamble with every single pick. And the fact that I feel like there's so much pressure on them to make the right picks 100%. This season, next season, and the next season.
And beyond. You look at a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Who have found their way back to the Super Bowl once again, the 3rd year in a row. You got to look at what they've done. Even talking with Harry Roseman earlier this week, the goal is to always get better in the offseason, never leaving a stone unturned, never leaving any stone unturned. Constantly staying aggressive. Even when the Bengals hopefully get back to this point of championship level contention, you still have to approach it with, how do we get better? How do we maximize this roster? How do we maximize the Joe Burrow era? That's what it's going to come down to, honestly. And I'm excited to see it all unfold, honestly.
Can I make a random prediction?
Sure.
I've been beating this drum all season long. Muma Meadow. Dude, I love watching that dude play. He is so fun to watch. He is aggressive. I don't know how you feel about it. I feel like at some point he will be a starter on defense and no longer just relied on special teams and stuff like that. I think one day he's going to be like a perfect. He gets right in there, and eventually he will be the one that's relied on to call the defense at some point.
I like that prediction. His run fits.
Bold, but
it's bold. His run fits, man. He always finds the ball carrier. Listen, he's a guy that I think he popped a lot on screen, especially in preseason. Right now, I'm in my evaluation phase of the roster where I'm literally going back looking at on film on a lot of these guys. Jean Meta, I hope I said his name right. I think he's a guy that is really starting to emerge for himself. I'm excited to see how this Al Golden's defense comes together. It's going to be exciting to see how this thing ticks. I still believe in the potential of Cam Taylor-Britt, of Dax Hill, of DJ Turner. I still believe in those guys, and I love Jordan Battle. I really believe Jordan Battle has a lot of potential at the state. He's a tone setter. He's a tone setter for these guys. I'm excited to see what happens with this defense. But Elise, thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed this.
Yeah,
thank you so much. I can't believe it took how long has it been?
Oh my God, it's been a while.
We've been hearing about each other for many years, and we finally sit down.
We finally it took New Orleans, but we finally sat down. Super Bowl Radio Row. You do a great work.
Thank you. So do you.
I'm going to continue following you along.
Likewise.
And hopefully we do something again here soon.
Yeah.
When we get back to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Though, right? When we get back to Cincinnati.
In our own city.
But if you like more video content like this, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content from TWSN Studios or Super Bowl Radio Row. And make sure you follow Elise Jesse.